Welcome to Restoring the Soul, a podcast dedicated to helping you close the gap between what you believe and what you actually experience. I'm your producer, Brian Beatty. Thank you for listening. Now, before we jump into today's conversation, Michael's hard at work this week at the Apprentice Gathering in Wichita, Kansas, and we hope to have some great news and conversations to share with you next week. But Michael actually sent me a text today and said that he ran into a woman at the conference from Chiang Mai, Thailand, who's a big fan of the podcast and says that it has helped her spiritually while she serves in Asia. We love to know you're out there, especially those on the other side of the world. Hello, Chiang Mai. If you're listening today and the podcast has been a blessing, feel free to drop a comment or two in Apple Podcast reviews or send us an email at info@restoringthesoul.com. I'm excited to introduce today's conversation as Michael spends time with a good friend, singer and songwriter Andy Gullahorn. It's been said that music in itself is healing, and if you have attended a Surfing for God intensive weekend, you may be familiar with Andy's music as he's been a guest and ally in restoring hearts. Andy's weapon is indeed a melody. But if you're not familiar with his music, we're going to kick off and close today's podcast with a few songs from Andy. In just a moment, you'll hear Not Too Late from the album Fault Lines, and we'll conclude with The Secret from the album Room to Breathe. You can find Andy's music in all the usual places, and if you'd like to learn more about him, visit andygullahorn.com.
You're so good, you can hide the storm that rages underneath. But with each false word, you were digging out the ground below your feet. And the pain that keeps me up at night is only partly 'cause I feel betrayed. No, the bigger part is knowing what it's gonna take for you to change. But it's not too late, it's not too late, it's not too late. It's not too late, it's not too late, it's not too late. The car is packed, you're headed to a bridge you think you wanna burn. Yeah, you've got plans, don't need dynamite or matches anymore. And you're driving at a breakneck speed, so you can't see all the caution signs. Saying turn around, the bridge is out. Save your life. It's not too late, it's not too late, it's not too late. It's not too late, it's not too late, it's not too late. Death has a strong grip, but it's nothing like the power the hand of God can bring. I've been to hell, and that's how I can tell you with authority. It's not too late to change your mind. It's not too late for the truth this time. Not too late to fall on your knees. It's not too late for apologies. Not too late to come clean, to face all the fallout that there might be. And it's not too late to understand grace is more than a concept to believe in. It's something more real than your beating heart. It runs to the depths of where you are. It follows you there, retracing your steps, whispering over and over again that it's not too late, not too late.
Well, Andy Gullahorn, welcome to Restoring the Soul. We're already chuckling before this starts.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we've tried to do this a couple of times with false starts, and a couple of those have been face-to-face, and one was a technological failure on my part. But I'd like to just start by having you share a little bit about who you are and what you do as a songwriter.
Yeah, originally a Texas boy, moved to Nashville 25 years ago because I loved writing songs and imagined that I wanted to write songs for other people so that they would go out and do all the work, and I would just get money in my mailbox. And then I wrote for publishing companies for a while, then realized that nobody else was going to sing my songs, so I have to sing them myself, and started traveling around and playing my own songs, and then realized that I really loved doing that, and I've been doing that ever since. Most of my time is on the road playing different shows or conferences or retreats or whatever, and I'll still write with other artists, and that pretty much takes up all my time. Well, that and my 3 kids and my wife.
Yeah, and you're deeply committed to them, as I know, but you also spend a lot of time on weekends on the road, and you have kind of a unique focus where you've performed in a lot of big venues like Red Rocks, which is for many performers kind of a dream, but you also do a lot of smaller gigs, and you work a lot with retreats and sometimes with different ministries around recovery. So tell me about that and how that happened.
Well, I don't know exactly how it started. I like to think I would say my top demographic are therapists. I think the reason why therapists sometimes like my music is because I'm using their language, because I've had to have a lot of therapy myself. So it just gets infused into the songs. And so one therapist might hand it off to another. And I think maybe you heard about my music through Al, maybe? I don't even remember.
Yeah, initially through Al Andrews, and then through Nate Larkin, and then Ian Cron and I were having a conversation. He goes, "Dude, you need to meet Andy Gullahorn." And then we finally met at the Telemachus conference.
Oh yeah, that's right. And so there are things like that where, a number of people would say, "Hey, I'm doing this conference or I'm doing this retreat, and I was going to use one of your songs in the context of the retreat, but would you be interested in coming?" And I'd always say yes, and started saying yes a long time ago. And I find myself at a lot of retreats like the fabulous one that you're part of there in Colorado, where I kind of go to play songs, but I love being in the recovery world and the therapeutic world, and it's good for me. And so playing songs just becomes a small part of it. I like participating. And so before I knew it, I was doing a lot of things in the recovery world or the therapy world. And I never had a 5-year plan for my music. I just figured I would write the songs that I'm writing and see what doors they open. And I just kind of try to walk through them when they're open. And I never imagined there would be like a addiction circuit. But I'm glad that I found it.
Yeah, and in some ways, it's kind of under the radar, where a lot of the concerts that you do and the performing, they're not, these big publicly announced things. Like I get emails from different Christian promoters and things like that, where the latest greatest person is at an arena, And again, although you've done some of that, yours is more under the radar, which I think is really kind of cool.
It's pretty fun. I think my music works better in a more intimate, personal setting. And I also like being able to get to know the people I'm playing songs for so that I know what to play. And so when most people look at my schedule, a lot of people will say, "Oh, it looks like you're not doing much music anymore." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I've been traveling more than I ever have." It's just they're not normal shows that I would publicize and say you can come buy a ticket for. But I do love those smaller places to play music, because hearing the stories and getting to know people and then playing songs for them, it feels so much better to me.
You mentioned that you play at our weekend, the Surfing for God Weekend Intensive, and I think you've been there for maybe 6 of those weekends, and you are just a really, really crucial part of that. But there's not a week or a couple weeks that go by that myself or one of our therapists doesn't use one of your songs or recommend one of your songs as an assignment when people are here from day to day, just because you do really write to the heart of people. And if anybody's listening and they're a therapist, a caregiver, spiritual director, Andy's music is really profound for that. And with your permission, before and after this interview, I want to play some clips of songs.
Sure, as long as it's not stuff you've recorded on your phone.
It makes me kind of feel like Jay Leno or Jimmy Fallon saying, "Hey, and I think we have a clip here for the audience," but it's going to be that kind of a thing. And I also want to say, in terms of your involvement on the weekend, you come and you're a brother and a colleague to myself and so many of the staff that are there to serve people. And it's almost like a surprise when you do music. And it's always cool to see when men will say, "Oh, this guy was just sitting having a conversation with me at dinner, or he was leading my group. And, I didn't know that it was Andy Gullahorn, the singer-songwriter," which is really fun because you are somebody with a big impact in the music world, but you're just a normal guy. And that's the best thing about you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for saying that.
And I know that we're speaking about you being under the radar, but I also know that you have a lot of respect from musicians and songwriters in Nashville and around the country.
Well, I mean, I guess that's debatable.
Well, and if listeners could see the video that I'm watching right now, you're blushing. You've got this, you've got this aw shucks kind of thing.
I have been. Nashville's a really great music community, and if you stick around long enough and try to write songs that will stick around too, then you make some really good friends. I'm really grateful for that.
Hey, tell me about how your first ever gig, I think you were 16 years old, if I remember the story correctly, you actually played with Willie Nelson. And you showed me a picture of it because I didn't believe it.
It's a weird story, but I started playing guitar in high school and learned it pretty quickly because I played piano when I was real little. So I had a musical background, and then just got the bug to play guitar in high school. And I learned a bunch of country music. That's all I listened to, so I could play a bunch of country songs. And there was a woman who used to work with my dad who had a country cover band that she was in, and they were playing some event at a fire hall outside of Austin. And she asked if I wanted to come play rhythm guitar, and I said, sure. So that was my first gig, and I went, and I was just playing acoustic guitar for all the country songs that they were playing. But it was right by Willie's ranch, and it was his birthday. And he just walked up. We're playing in the kind of the garage of the fire hall, and people were dancing in the driveway. And Willie walked up, and he knew the lady who was a singer, and they asked him to play some songs, and he ended up playing for a very long time. And so then I was just there playing guitar with Willie Nelson for my first show. It was a great photo op. It was a lot of fun, but it wasn't like I met him and we became friends. He would just tell me what key each song was in, and then at the end I said, "Thanks, Willie," and he says, "Thank you." And that was it.
What was it like at that age, first gig, to be standing on stage or floor with Willie Nelson?
I mean, it's pretty cool. I felt that it was a pretty cool thing, but I also knew, oh man, it's going to be all downhill from here. It's a horrible way to
Yeah, it's all downhill from here. Yeah. You don't want to peak too soon.
Yeah, that's really peaking too soon.
We could go through a list of artists who, after their first gig, it went all downhill from there.
Yes.
One of the things I love about you, Andy, and I saw this from the very first moment we met face to face, is that you have a very unorthodox way of kind of seeing life. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about your songwriting is that you see things and you can put words to things in a way that most people don't. But when they hear it, they go, oh yeah, that's something I can relate to. But, you're a bowler and you're a badminton player, a very competitive one. And then you just have different ways of responding to, for example, even Christian fellowship. So tell me the story, what you've called before the high five story, because I think this is a picture of just kind of how you do life.
There's a friend of mine named Gabe Scott, who's also a musician, and he's been on this tour with me that I've been a part of for the last 17 years called Behold the Lamb of God. It's Andrew Peterson. He's a wonderful singer-songwriter. He started that 20 years ago. And so we'd be on the tour every December, and I'm kind of the activities director. It's not like a paid position. It's just that I like activities, and so I direct activities. And Gabe is also competitive and likes playing sports and that kind of thing. So we would always play games and sports throughout the whole tour. And then at the end of every tour, we would say, hey, we need to hang out more the rest of the year. And then we would go our separate ways. He'd be playing guitar for somebody and I'd be on the road, and we wouldn't see each other again for 11 months. And then we'd be sad that we didn't hang out the rest of the year. So after a number of years of making empty promises of hanging out, I just had this idea one night at a party we were at together, that he told me that he moved 1.5 miles from my house. So I suggested that I was going to text him later that week, and we would leave our houses at the same time and walk to the middle point and give each other a high five and then walk back home. And then I told him if we did that once a week for 10 years, then we could probably make it on our wife's favorite TV show, which is CBS Sunday Morning. It's a kind of story that we can have on there. And he was up for it. So we started that week. We just, on a Wednesday, I just texted him, and we walked in the middle point is a park called Sevier Park here in Nashville, Tennessee. And we gave each other a high five and talked for like 3 hours, and then walked back home. And then we had to cut down the 3-hour talking time. But we've been doing that every week for about 5.5 years. And it really has become, some people laugh when I say this, and I halfway laugh when I say it. It's become one of the more important spiritual disciplines in my life, of walking for 30 minutes just to give this guy a high five. And sometimes we'll talk, sometimes we'll shoot baskets there at the park. It kind of, about 4 years ago, we discovered that on Monday mornings at that park in the gym, they play badminton. So we had this 86-year-old man teach us how to play badminton, and then we've been playing it ever since. It's amazing to me how much that has transformed my life. Not only is he in my life a lot more now, I mean, we see each other multiple times a week. Really just knowing that there's another person who literally walks through the snow sometimes just to give you a high five, it does me good in my life.
So just to be clear, because you talked about how sometimes you'll shoot baskets or do badminton, and I like how you pronounce it with the N, badminton, which is the correct pronunciation. Yeah. That sometimes, or more often than not, you'll just walk the 30 minutes, meet in the middle of this 1.5 miles, give each other a high five, and kind of turn around.
Yeah, that's the silent high five, which I think the first time we did a silent high five was maybe a month into it, when we discovered it takes a lot of time to walk 30 minutes and then talk for 2 hours. So we were just too busy and said, hey, I don't have time to talk. But we devised this plan where we would get to the middle point and then pass each other and walk 20 paces and turn around and then give each other 5 and not say a word. And that one, well, at least the first time, it felt like that was pointless walking there. I remember being really down on it on the way there, thinking, why am I even doing this? This is stupid. There's no way I'm going to do this for 10 years. And the whole point is to spend time with my friend, and I don't get to spend any time with him. I'm just giving him a 5 and walking back home. And after giving him the 5, I just felt, I could feel immediately how purposeful it was. It's just the intention and the showing up over and over again over a long period of time. And that's just a good example of the way that it's invaded my life. And I think especially in terms of recovery, that's one of the most important things for me in my life, having kind of showing up again and again over a long period of time, just being consistent.
Yeah, it makes me, not to have to make it religious, but it makes me think of the whole idea of being faithful in small things, and how I can so easily underestimate how small things done again and again really matter, especially relationally.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, I like to think, I was always the kind of guy who would think, oh, this is the kind of man that I want to be. Wouldn't it be awesome to have a story where I walked and gave a friend a high five every week for 10 years? But I could never get started and do it. Like, what that takes is actually the first week of walking a mile and a half and doing it. And then the second week. And actually I remember after we had the first year, we had a bunch of guys come and walk with me, and some guys walked with Gabe. It was kind of a celebration of the first year. Actually, our friend Kurt Thompson was there for the first anniversary high five. I remember the week after the year, I was like, oh man, now 9 years left. This is going to be hard. So there are definitely seasons where it's like, oh, I can't believe this is getting way harder to do. And now at 5.5 years, it really just feels like it's part of my life. And you're right, not to, have to put a spiritual point on it, but it reminds me of, in my mind, I always go back to this time, maybe 16 years ago, when I went to go see a spiritual director. I was going through a lot of hard things in my life. And I decided that because of these hard things, I was ready to be a spiritual grown-up. I always wanted to do things like have a quiet time or read the Bible or pray, do things that real grown-ups do. And I sucked at it really bad. And I went to the spiritual director who I loved. He reached out to me in the middle of this hard time, said, hey, would you like to come talk with me? And I was like, oh, I'd love to. And I went, and I expected to tell him, everything that's going on in my life. And then for him to take me under his wing and make me a, spiritual Jedi like he was. And so he listened to me say that I wanted to do all these, spiritual disciplines. And after he listened to me, he said, well, do you like reading? And I said, no, I fall asleep every time I start reading. It's not just the Bible, it's everything. I just don't like reading. I can read, I'm literate, but I don't like it. And then he said, well, do you like getting up early in the morning? I said, no, I hate getting up early in the morning. That's why I'm a musician. And then he told me that his greatest spiritual discipline was walking his dog on the golf course, because he loved walking his dog on the golf course. And so he just told me, you need to just find something that you really love to do, like that really brings you joy, and trust that God will meet you there. Don't do it the other way around. And I remember as a 20-something-year-old, I don't remember how old I was, thinking that was just a cop-out, that I was going to, decide that what I really love to do was, play blackjack, and God's going to need to meet me there, which he totally could. But, years later, with things like the high five, I look back, and with badminton and with my bowling league and these kinds of things, those things really bring me joy. And I see the way that God has met me there, and has not just made my life better, but made me more interested in a deeper relationship with him.
My guess is that you don't spend that 30 minutes walking thinking about God the whole time, or that's even your intention, but it's the act of doing it that is a rhythm and a ritual that's meaningful.
Totally. It just kind of seeps in. To me, the spirituality just kind of, it's not an intentional spiritual discipline. Like, oh, this morning, I'm going to do the sign of the cross and walk out the door and, pray the rosary on the way to a high five. It's just like doing that. And the experience of it is spiritual to me, and it's good for my soul.
Which brings up this whole beautiful, wide topic of how everything is spiritual. And you mentioned Andrew Peterson. Because of you, I was able to get his, there's a book that I think Doug McKelvey is the name.
Doug McKelvey, yeah.
Yeah, and so Andrew and his Rabbit Room organization, Andrew wrote the preface to Every Moment Holy. And all of our staff got that to go through for 2020. And Andrew wrote this phrase in the preface where he said, there are no unsacred places, only sacred places and desecrated places. And the walk is sacred. It's spiritual.
Definitely.
It also reminds me of our relationship with God, where over the last several years, more and more of my prayer life, when I said I don't really have much of a prayer life, has deepened through silence and through not saying anything. So when you talk about the walk and then the silent high five in particular, that God is there giving us the high five, whether we're performing or doing anything, profoundly spiritual as we might typically think of that. And that oftentimes the most intimate kind of thing is silence.
I found that to be the case for me. I mean, even thinking about going to that spiritual director years ago, I think the kind of relationship with God that I was longing for, and I thought I would get by, checking off the boxes of having a quiet time in this way, or whatever I learned from, Christian camps growing up. I feel like I'm closer to that not end result, but like kind of a real experience and relationship with God. And it didn't come from any of those things for me. It came from participating in what's happening in my life and trying to walk through life awake, not sleepwalking. But also, yeah, you're right. The silence, the walk, the 30 minutes of walk there and back. Sometimes I might be thinking about something in particular, but just being there and being in my body and doing something I love, or playing badminton for 2 hours. That's just, he's there too.
And it brings joy.
Mm-hmm.
I love how you mentioned being in your body, walking, badminton, they're physical, and we're both learning, and we've talked about this, about how spirituality really is embodied.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, that has definitely been my experience, because especially coming from a place where I felt like anything spiritual is just what I think or what I say, and moving away from that to a more embodied version of it. It also kind of takes the pressure of controlling my spirituality out of my hands.
What do you mean by controlling your spirituality? I think that's important.
I think of it as, if I think these right theological thoughts, or if I say the right prayers, or if there's some way for me to figure out mentally how to get from point A to point B, whether that's, closer to God, which I don't even know exactly what that means. But it's kind of, to me, it's a surrendering of figuring out. That's one of the things I love about the 12 steps, is accepting that my thinking is broken. And so I can participate in something that's already happening, and I can surrender, versus trying to, where it's all about me trying to figure it out or have the right thoughts or have the right words. I can just move out of my head. Not that, like, my mind has nothing to do with it, but it's not all in my head.
Yeah, that it actually becomes experience. Hey, before we wrap up, I want to come back to what you said about being awake. That's a big word for you. That's a word that I've used more and more in terms of my growth and trying to learn what it means to be a relatively healthy human. What does it mean for you to be awake and to wake up? And why is that important?
First of all, from a songwriting standpoint, which is what I love to do and what I feel like in some ways I'm put here on earth to do. Talking to songwriters, one of the biggest pieces of advice or things I would say is a job of a songwriter is to not sleepwalk through the world. So from a songwriting standpoint, it's just paying attention to the conversations around me and looking for, whether it's watching TV or hearing conversations walking down the street, listening for the conversations for something that might be for me in there, that I can, a phrase that would stand out and I could say, oh, that I really like that phrase. I wonder if I can turn it this way or use it. You know, if I was going to write a song about that, what would it be? So just always looking for lines for songs, just kind of walking through the world, always paying attention. But then outside of the songwriting world, that's what it is. It's like, it's an expectation that there's something for me here in what I'm doing, whether that's, you know, at church or at a retreat or bowling or whatever it is. It's just this trying to walk through life with an expectation that there's something for me here that I'm looking for. And when it happens or I experience it, it's going to change me. So to me, that's what it is. You know, not sleepwalking, kind of being aware is, you know, it's not like I'm actually just vegging out or something like that. But to me, the opposite of being aware or what sleepwalking would look like is just to assume that there's nothing for me here and I'm just going to go through the motions with zero expectation of being changed by what I'm doing.
I love that. It's more than just that sleepwalking is depressed or numb, but it's really about awareness and attentiveness. And then as you talk about that there's something for you, it's this anticipation and expectation of receiving good things. I
experience that every time I'm on a Restoring the Soul, a Surfing for God weekend, where, you know, I've been there a few times before. I know kind of what happens there. Every time's like the first time, kind of going with the expectation that who knows what it's going to be.
I don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah. It could be a conversation with somebody else on staff or somebody who's attending the weekend. God always shows up, and the kind of, I get really excited about that. Just kind of showing up like, I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be something. There's something for me here and I'm going to be part of something. And there's just an excitement to it.
That's cool. Well, I want to be more that way. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy being with you is I want to be more like that. So we need to wrap up, and I can't wait to see you in about 5 weeks in Colorado. Thank you for the gift that you bring to the world of music and songwriting. And AndyGullahorn.com is your website, tells all about your music. But thanks for your time today, brother.
Thank you.
Back when Charlie was a boy, somebody handed a secret down with a long list of unwritten rules. So he died before he let it out. He carried it like a silver dollar in the pocket of his heart. He cried out for some room to breathe, but his pride just kept it in the dark. And the darkness was like a rainfall to a flower, I needed it to grow. Kept digging deeper till they wrapped their wretched arms around his soul. Oh. that secret go? That boy soon became a man. He thought he was too strong to lose, surrounded by a wife and friends who knew everything about him except the truth. 'Cause the truth was like a double-edged sword in someone else's hand. His friends would listen, but he never thought that they could understand. Oh, the way the secret can. In the middle of the sidewalk is a single blade of grass. It kept pushing up from under till it finally made a crack. When that crack became a canyon wide, it was past the point of covering. So with no familiar place to hide, Charlie set the secret free. And his freedom was a hammer to a dark room wall that let the light shine through. 'Cause he knew carrying secrets to the grave was impossible to do. Secrets carry you.
So thank you for listening to another episode of Restoring the Soul. We want you to know that Restoring the Soul is so much more than a podcast. What we're all about is helping couples and individuals get unstuck. You know how some people go to counseling or marriage therapy for months or even years and never really get anywhere? Our intensive programs help clients get unstuck in as little as 2 weeks. To learn more, visit restoringthesoul.com. That's restoringthesoul.com.